We know for a fact, even according to Kamala Harris herself, that she was put in charge of the border. So your reaction to all this backpedaling?
Well, the reaction is that the media knows this is a weak point for her. They're going to use this because they should. She has failed, and she was, whether it was on paper or not, she was the border czar. She was tasked with fixing this problem. She was tasked with finding the root causes, and she failed, just like this administration has failed to secure the southern border. Now what the media is doing is going into cleanup for them. They're trying to distance her from the border problem because they know that this is the #1 issue for Americans across this country. So it does not surprise me they're going into cleanup mode, but it shows you how much they know this border issue will hurt her in this election, as it should. And that's why they're trying to distance her from that term border czar.
So I want to read an excerpt. This was Joe Biden back in 2021. I've asked her, the VP, today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle, and the countries that help are going to need help in stemming the movement of so many folks, stemming the migration to our southern border. So, I mean, okay, so he didn't say czar, but I think it's pretty clear that he put her in charge. And by the way, she had tweeted that she was in charge of the border and looking forward to fixing it. So, Lieutenant, it's got to be frustrating that for 3.5, almost 4 years now, they've taken zero responsibility for the border while almost 15 million people have come in.
You know, it is frustrating, especially, you know, from a law enforcement perspective, when we see what we've experienced in Texas over the last 3.5 years. But if you look at the numbers themselves, the data speaks for itself. Regardless of titles, the fact is when you have that leadership role, your responsibility is to get to the root causes. You look at the illegal immigrants that have come from the Northern Triangle countries and Mexico in the last 3.5 years, it's been well over 4 million just from those countries alone. And you compare it to the previous administration, which is 1.8 million, there's no, without a doubt, it's indisputable that they have caused the worst unmitigated disaster on our border that we have ever experienced in our lifetime. I can tell you from my experience, being in law enforcement, I have never experienced what we have seen in the last 3.5 years. So they have that responsibility regardless of titles. That is their role in that leadership position, is to secure our border, to protect the American people from any threats at all. But yet they have not done that. And now they want to take credit because border crossings are low, which we know for a fact, yes, they are low between ports of entry, but they're still allowing legal immigrants into the country by direct flights or through the CBP1 app. So by far, encounters, they still have reached historic levels that we have not experienced in years.
That's a great point. A lot of work still to be done because they undid what former President Trump had did as soon as President Biden took office. All right, Sheriff, last question for you. I know you're running in a border state, Arizona, of course. When you speak to voters there, to constituents, are they buying this bait and switch, so to speak, with Vice President Harris?
No, they're not buying it. First of all, as bad as Biden was, she's worse. And so they know that. They're not buying it. And they're not buying this whole distancing themselves from the border issue. Now they're bragging, like the lieutenant says, they're bragging about lower numbers. Let me put into perspective, because what they've done is shift the Overton window on the American people. What they have done is they're still at 84,000 apprehensions. This doesn't include what they're using CBP1 app or flying them in like the lieutenant mentioned. But what they're saying is 84,000 is good. By the way, if you do the math on that, that's almost 1 million for the year. That's 2.5 times more than President Trump's last year. So do not let them sit there and tell you that it's better now than it was under President Trump. It's another lie from this administration. And the American people and the people in Arizona, as a candidate for the U.S. Senate, they're not buying it. And that's why we need change in Washington, D.C.
Excellent points there. Americans are much smarter than the Democrats often give them credit for. All right, gentlemen, there, Sheriff Mark Lamb.